Hello, good morning or good afternoon. I don't know what time is in the US is morning now. Greetings from Loyola University and Mount St. Mary, where I'm teaching philosophy and ethics. I hold PhD in philosophy from University of Belgrade from Serbia. I'm originally from Serbia. And PhD in dogmatics from Northwest University from South Africa. I'm currently also doing PhD in higher education in affirmative action field. I hope you're enjoying conference so far. It's a very interesting topic, multiple contexts and multiple perspectives. Now, I chose to talk about Kierkegaard's subjectivity of truth and faith because he's kind of a precursor of postmodernism in the 19th century, and he's a thinker of faith and truth and subjectivity and objectivity, and for that reason, I think he's a good for the context of postmodern conversion theory. For that reason, I want to start with the review of his book, Concluding for Unscientific Postscript. Well, this book is published in 1846, and the nice review is done by Swenson and Lowry, where they're saying that Kierkegaard intended to actually finish his philosophical fragments. That was a previous book, and Postscript is 6 times longer. It's a very long book, and the term unscientific is actually ironic allusion to rationalism of Hegel. Hegel was very rationally oriented because whatever rational for him was real, and reality was based on rational analysis in objective sense, and Hegel would always reject the point that truth is subjective because it's fairly objective and comprehensive and systematic and so on. So for Kierkegaard, truth is truth for an existing human subject. There is no truth apart from humanity as subject. So subjective thinker is the thinker who thinks only about the inner self and what is happening in the inner self. And this idea really looks like postmodern a bit. Well, subjective thinkers by themselves explore the unknown and they seek to understand the reality. For them, existence itself, the life we lead, is a subjective experience primarily. Properly speaking, there is no objective humanity. There are only individual humans. A crowd might be an abstract idea, but a person is rooted in a real reality. Because individuals are constantly in flux and change, they're always probing for truth. They're constantly learning or becoming. This idea of becoming also sounds like postmodern because there is no objective truth and stability of a theory of knowledge. Knowledge is fluid, truth is fluid, and whatever you believe, whatever you experience is based on your subjectivity. Unlike Hegel, who created a system of objective truth or speculative philosophy, Kierkegaard looked inside a human being to look at the individual human experience. Well, in his book, Postscript, Unscientific Postscript, Concluding Unscientific Postscript, he deals with the objective problem first. Christianity is viewed as historical phenomenon, and Christianity is rooted in history, the life, death, and resurrection of the founder of Christianity, Christ Jesus, and the ministry of the church. These historical arguments, according to Kierkegaard, cannot convince anyone to embrace Christian faith, because they are not piercing the heart of what religion means for the individual human spirit. Well, in that regard, we can say that he's truly subjective because he's not looking at Christianity as an objective historical religion primarily. Furthermore, in several chapters of part 2, his task was to define what it means to become subjective. The subjective thinker is passionately interested in their own internal happiness. That's what Christianity promises. The subjective thinker never loses the sight of the fact that they are themselves a person existing in time, in a constant state of becoming. So that's that paradox. Seeking eternity, but still in constant flux of time, becoming subjectively. Well, in this context, Christianity actually is a paradox, and Kierkegaard concludes that Christian relationship to eternal happiness is expressed through its opposite, through suffering. The consciences of guilt and sin help to sharpen the Christian pathos or suffering, and thus intensify the relationship to God and eternal happiness. This is a paradox. More we suffer, closer we are to God, and closer we are to eternal life. Such existential relationship is deeper, affects the individual far more than any objective intellectual process, any doctrine, any history of Christianity. A few interesting quotes from Postscript. On page 37, Kierkegaard said, Christianity is precisely an affair of sadness. Or on page 187, immortality, subjectivity's most passionate interest. Or on page 212, only in subjectivity is there decision. While wishing to become objective is untruth, it is the passion of the infinite and not its content that is decisive, for its content is just what it is itself. This is the way in which the subjective how and subjectivity are truth. Now this is clear. He doesn't believe in objective truth as such in Christian faith. The only truth in Christian faith that exists is existential. He's existentialist. It's subjective, is passionate interest from inwardness. It's faith, primarily affair of the spirit, and affair of what is happening in our inwardness of our existential life. A few more interesting quotes from his book. When subjectivity, inwardness is truth, then objectively truth is the paradox. The fact that truth is objectively the paradox is just what proves subjectivity to be truth, since the objective situation proves repellent, and this resistance on the part of objectivity or its expression is the resilience of inwardness and the gauge of its strength. Now what he's trying to say there, objectively we are receiving the data, but it doesn't change us. It's a paradox that by rejecting that objectivity, we actually live subjectivity of the truth. Subjectivity culminates in passion. Christianity is that paradox of that passion, and it's in accord with who we are existentially. Now, this is the most important part of my presentation, as he's trying on page 511, as I said, it's a long book, to investigate the problems with objectivity. What are the problems when you consider the truth in Christianity in objective manner, objective approach? First of all, there's a problem of doctrine. If you accept Christian teaching, you accept actually the what of Christianity, but not how. So you instantly people are turned outwards in order to find what Christian doctrine is. That's something that is outside of themselves. And because of that, what Christianity is anything but what I am as a Christian. The second problem is intellectual faith. It's very similar to doctrine. The mark of being a Christian is appropriation of some intellectual sort, intellectual appropriation or intellectual understanding of what Christianity is. It's also rejected as objective truth because faith does not become specifically mine. It becomes the process of intellectual reasoning, based on the process of intellectual reasoning. Third problem that he sees in objectivity is the problem of sacrament or ritual. It's something that happens to me from outside, not from inside, and the sacrament is the gift of the church, of course. Then the individual is baptized or you're participating in the Eucharist. You are becoming something externally, not internally. What is the solution for this tension between objectivity and subjectivity? The solution is that we should make a decision that rests in a subject. Being a Christian, he says, is defined not by what of Christianity, but by the how of what it means to be a Christian. The how can go with that paradox, as we said. There is a tension between this limited time and limited life we live and eternity, a desire for immortality, and in that tension the faith, subjective faith, is developed. Having faith is quite distinct in its inwardness from all other sorts of objectivity that I already enlisted, doctrine, intellectual faith, or sacrament. Now at the end, before I make some implications and conclusions, I want to read his story from the book that he finished the book with. It's quite an interesting narrative, and it's kind of funny, but it also has a message. It is said that in England a man was attacked on the highway by a robber who made himself unrecognizable by wearing a big wig. He rushes at the traveler, seizing him by the throat and shouts, "Your purse!" He gets the purse, which he keeps, but throws away the wig. A poor man comes down the same road, puts on the wig, and arrives at the next town where the traveler had already raised the alarm. He is recognized, arrested, and recognized by the traveler, who swears that he is the man. By chance, the robber is present in the courtroom, sees the misunderstanding, and addresses the judge. It seems to me that the traveler has more regard for the wig than for the man, and he asks to be allowed to make an experiment. He puts on the wig, seizes the traveler by the throat, crying, "Your purse!" and the traveler recognizes the robber and offers to swear. In turbulent times when the government has to defend its existence with a death penalty, it would not be unthinkable for a man to be executed for an opinion that he no doubt had in a juridical and civil sense, but hardly in an intellectual sense, the only trouble being that he has already taken an oath. So Kierkegaard says, in one way or the other, with everyone who has a what and is not attentive of how, swears, takes an oath, he runs errands, he risks life and blood, he's executed, only because for the wig. So the wig represents that objectivity that we cannot live with in Christianity. We need that living faith, inwardness, passion for Christ, something that comes as a real man, the symbol of subjectivity here. Now, if we wish to draw a few implications of my presentation or presentation of Kierkegaard's work on scientific postscript, we can say that Kierkegaard is the father of subjective and postmodern Christianity. His conversion theory is based on subjective faith only. Conversion is understood only in terms of inwardness and subjectivity of faith and truth. Conversion is always based on the appropriation of paradox of Christ. The paradox is that tension between limited mortality and eternal immortality. Postmodern conversion theory, therefore, would undermine the impact of dogma, as I said in his analysis, historicity of faith, scripture or church, intellectual faith, and sacraments. Now, in the Adventist context, as this conference is set up in Adventist context, we can say that contextual understanding of the postmodern conversion theory must take into consideration that Christianity is primarily inwardness and subjectivity of faith and truth. In this way, if we want somehow to critique Kierkegaard, we may say probably that its uniqueness and historical relevancy is still there, though Kierkegaard made a significant impact contribution through correcting the cold Protestant orthodoxy of his times. Faith as subjectivity is still a hidden gem relevant for the 21st century. And I would say in the Adventist context, since we sometimes put a great emphasis on objectivity of truth, what we believe, doctrine, what we do, practice, what we do with other people, mission, is somehow looks to people from outside or for people who are struggling for subjectivity in inwardness of faith as that artificial wig, and that we actually need something more substantial, and that is the true, genuine experience of conversion in these postmodern times when people are leaving the church, especially the young people. We need to reignite, to re-emphasize this fact that Christianity is inward experience, that it's matter of faith and truth. We still need the church, we still need the doctrine, we still need historical Christ, but it means almost nothing if it's not faithfully in appropriate way accepted through inwardness and passion for Christ by this subjectivity of the truth. When Christ said, "I am the truth," according to Kierkegaard, that's subjective form of truth. Thank you so much and enjoy your conference.
Well, we've had a very interesting presentation on Kierkegaard and subjective faith. I see there's one question here. Looking at the 4 problems of objectivity here presented, is there a relationship between what Kierkegaard says and the submissions of the New Age movement? I don't think that there's an easy connection with Kierkegaard and the New Age movement. Kierkegaard is, as Dr. Santrac was pointing out, Kierkegaard, he reacted to a Protestant orthodoxy, and Aleksandar Santrac said a cold Protestant orthodoxy. So what you have is that you have a Protestant faith, that was initiated by people like Luther, and then you have at a certain time that an orthodoxy creeps in, and where faith is very much, you could say, institutionalized and formalized. And this is what Kierkegaard was was reacting against. And Kierkegaard, when he is saying that faith is subjective, maybe you can compare it with this, and you have a can. Let's say you go to the supermarket and you buy a can of tomato sauce or beans or something, else, and that is the faith. You have received that can, and you have also been told, don't open the can, just pass on the can. And so you have the same story to the next person, who receives the can, and you warn them not to open the can and just pass it on. So this is, you could say, a little bit of an objective attitude towards faith, where the faith is, you could say, something that has been transmitted, which is very important, that we receive from what what others have seen and heard. But you also get a warning, well, that's it, and don't further think about it. It needs to be passed on just as it is. The idea of subjective truth and subjective faith goes against this. So the idea of subjective truth is you have, let's say, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? Which is an event that people have witnessed. We see that in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, in 1 Corinthians 15, chapter 15, what others who were actually very close to the event have passed on. And Paul was actually very close to the event because he has met the people in Jerusalem who had been witness. And it is shortly after the visit in Jerusalem that he wrote the letter to the Corinthians. So historians generally see that as a great, you could say, a great point for the objective truth of the Christian faith. Well, having said that, if you would let this go and you would just, say, okay, it doesn't matter whether Jesus has been raised or not. Well, Paul has already, something to say about that. Then our life is in vain. And what are we doing? So on the one hand, we would say that objective truth, that Jesus was in fact raised from the dead and that people have seen him and heard him, that plays a role. But I think what Kierkegaard is doing is not so much that he's saying that doesn't play a role, but what he says is that needs to become subjective truth to you. And what I hear Santrac saying is, it's not so much the what question, but the how. So that means, what impact does this resurrection of Jesus Christ have in your life? And that means, that has to do with the what you could call the subjectivization of faith. If the faith is not really transforming your life and has an impact in the way you look at the world, the way you act in the world, and if it's just an objective truth that you are, claiming to possess, then he says that objective faith is worth nothing compared to subjective faith and subjective truth. So this is how I understand that. So, and that has virtually nothing to do with the New Age movement. If there are any more questions, I would appreciate that. I see there is, how is application of the truth different from the subjectivity presented here? So is subjectivity, is subjective truth, is that all about that you apply it in your life? Well, I think that you know, and I haven't, you know, presented now on Kierkegaard. I'm just a person who is responding as far as I understand what Kierkegaard has said. Is what you see in what Santrac was emphasizing is you have Hegel emphasizing objective truth and reason, and unless it's objective truth, it's not worth pursuing. Kierkegaard, on the other hand, is emphasizing subjective truth. And in subjective truth, I think what is important is that the you could say the distinction between what is believed and how it is appropriate is being, you could say, is decreasing. So in other words, the event that Jesus has been raised from the dead as a historical event, and your life as a believer, these are not two different realms, but they should actually somehow be integrated into each other. And how is that being done? I think that with Kierkegaard is that he has emphasized the importance of experience. So before Kierkegaard, that was not really in the picture, but experience is now, you could say, a determining factor of truth. So unless you have experienced the resurrection of Jesus, his resurrection is not true. Yeah. So it's the primacy of experience, and that is something that is, I think, very typical for postmodern, the postmodern context. You know, we're looking at conversion in multiple contexts and multiple perspectives, and I think that in the postmodern context, the experience is a central criterion for truth. Yes, I see here another question. We have 5 more minutes. Selfless love is the key to discipleship. Has the post-Christian world not seen the application of selfless love in Christian believers? So selfless love is key in being a follower of Christ. And then the idea is, well, in a postmodern setting, postmodern context, is that maybe what is most lacking? Selfless love. I wish I had a panel here to ask other people around me, but I am now the only one. I'm actually not knowledgeable about what really the reason is, but I think that it is definitely a very important factor that people see that, you know, and that is I think also what we saw this morning in the present keynote address, is that when people see love being modeled in others, that can actually have an important impact on your faith.